It's February 2006. Then Cuban President Fidel Castro speaks during a ceremony at Havana's Revolution Plaza. In this picture, a supporter of Venezuela's Hugo Chavez points a pistol toward opponents of the president during clashes in Caracas in November 2007. While in this shot from June of last year, Andean women fight for the ball during a farmers' football match during the National Communities Championships in Callao, Peru. Well, they're a selection of images from the Associated Press Latin America photo report that have gone on display in Havana. The three-month exhibition comes as the news agency hosted a workshop for 16 promising local photographers. Its aim to foster equality and ethical news imagery in Cuba. Well, for more on the AP's exhibition in Havana and that workshop held this past week, I'm joined by Santiago Lyon, the Director of Photography with the Associated Press. He's just returned from Havana and joins us from our New York studios. Where did the idea come from to set up this kind of exhibition and workshop in Cuba?
Well, it suddenly occurred to us that doing something in Cuba, a country where we've had a bureau for the last 10 years, and a country that's going through a transition from Fidel Castro to Raúl, it seemed that it would be a good idea to show the Cuban public and the Cuban photojournalistic community the breadth and the quality of the work that the Associated Press does in photography every day all over the world.
And were there any difficulties politically trying to set it up?
Well, it took a long time. There probably about a year in between when we proposed the idea first to the Cuban authorities and through when it was approved, and then the preparations of getting the pictures in and the logistics and finding a location. So it took quite a while, but I'm very glad to report that we inaugurated it on Saturday, and about 200 people showed up for the inauguration, and by all accounts it was quite a success.
What is your sense of the appetite for Cuban people for photographs around the world, if not only South America?
Well, I think that they don't often get to see this type of imagery, and they certainly don't often get to see this type of imagery displayed in, big prints hung on an exhibition wall. We did this in a 17th century convent, or an 18th century convent, excuse me, in Havana, and it was quite impressive to see these photographs printed very large and hanging from a wall where the viewer has time to look at them and ponder them and engage with them. And that's something that it doesn't happen very often in Cuba. And
I think one of the more iconic photographs is the Iwo Jima one, which many people might not associate automatically with the Associated Press, but nonetheless is very much in the memory of people, particularly those who would still survive the Second World War.
Yes, indeed. That's arguably one of the most widely reproduced images in history. And as you say, I think for that image and a number of these images, to make that connection between iconic images of that nature and a news organization like the Associated Press, which continues to work and continues to gather photojournalism from all over the world on a daily basis, I think those are connections that are not always obvious to the viewer.
If I could draw your attention to the photograph that was taken in the West Bank settlement outpost of Amona, where we see a Jewish settler struggling with an Israeli security officer who's clearly surrounded by plenty of other Israeli security officers. I mean, that very much tells the story within a story of the struggle within Israeli society over the whole issue of settlements.
That picture and the pictures from that story are quite dramatic, and as you say, it's a very effective and powerful way of telling a story from a particular part of the world and drawing one's conclusions from what goes on there.
And final question, I'm wondering whether any implications for Associated Press by having this exhibition in Cuba, whether first of all you see it as anything to do with the relative opening up that we may or may not be witnessing in Cuba at the moment with the change of regime, and whether or not in the US that there were any implications for you.
No, we've had an operation or a bureau in Cuba for the last 10 years. We have a staff of maybe a dozen people all in. We operate there regularly. We're allowed to do that under the rules set by the U.S. government, and we don't really see any problem with that. As to whether the ability to set up this exhibition was as a result of the change in power or was as a result of changes that are happening anyway in Cuba, it's quite hard to tell. But we really welcome the opportunity to be able to show our work there and to hold the workshop for the 16 Cuban photographers and show them and explain to them how we work, and through practical exercises assign them stories and critique and work on their stories with the aim of improving the state of Cuban photojournalism. And it's not limited to Cuba. These are things that we do periodically all over the world. So it just happened to be Cuba at this time.
Santiago Lyon, thank you very much indeed. And don't forget to check out International Correspondence online. You can do that by logging on to cnn.com/correspondence to see all or part of this week's show again. You can also view our archive, take part in the quick vote and read the weekly blog. It's all at cnn.com/correspondence. And that's all for this edition of the programme. Tune in again next time for another look at how the media are handling the big issues. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney. Thanks for joining us.